Justin, we got the red light. It means we are on air, or I don't know.
Okay,
On air used to be the radio, so I guess we'll call it on air anyway. And we're recording
sounds good.
another podcast. And, Justin, I'm so happy to have you back. We are on our second conversation as audio signals podcast where we talk about stories and storytellers, storytelling. So everything is storytelling. You do it in a very particular way, in a very artistic way, with a company that everybody knows, with characters that are at this point iconic. And in our culture, wherever in the world you are, everybody knows who is Snoopy and Charlie Brown and Charles Schulz. So you work with them. You've been working with the company for a long time, and you do
Mm.
your thing. I'm glad to have you back. It's very easy. I just drink a coffee and have a conversation with you. So welcome back, Justin.
Thank you, Marco. I'm so glad to get back. Talking with you is so easy and it's always
Oh,
interesting.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And I remember our first conversation. We, I think, is one of those where I say, well, we go for 30 minutes, and I think it was way over 45 because it was
I
so,
don't doubt it. I tend to get
so
a
much
little
fun.
long-winded. Yeah,
But
I'll
I
go
could
on.
actually say that we already planned these. I'm happy to have you back, and I will be even happier to have you back again because there's so many different things we can talk about from a creative and storytelling process. And so maybe it'll become an ongoing chat, and I
Oh,
would
that'd be
love that to
great.
happen. Yeah,
That'd be great. I love conversation, and especially when it's interesting. And your show's always
absolutely.
interesting.
Thank you, thank you. So we have something in common. We are both part of the Mentor Project, which
Yeah.
eventually we can mention in the future. You do teach a lot how to design. You've been in Africa doing it with kids that you started from scratch. I know that alone was an adventure. And but I want to, for people that didn't listen to the first episode, I want to invite you to do a short intro about yourself. Who is Justin Thompson?
Okay. I was an actor and a stuntman in New York for 16 years, mostly during the 90s. And then in 2003, I moved to California and pursued my fallback career, which was art and illustration. And I started working for the Charles Schulz company, the studio in Santa Rosa, California, as a merchandise reviewer. We had to look at everything that had the Peanuts characters on it, make sure everything looked right. For the license, we don't want any weird looking Snoopies out there. And for a couple of years at the studio, I was the studio's liaison to Japan, and I would go there and talk to the licensees who use Peanuts on their products, everything from food to golf bags to T-shirts and anything. And I'd go talk to the licensees, do a little art direction, and I'd give a presentation. And this went on each year for about 13, 14 years. And now I moved into doing artwork because we're producing a lot of our own artwork in the studio now. It's not just reviewing merchandise. We started creating content around 2009 or 10, and I've done a lot of that for Peanuts, writing and compiling books for them. I've done about 8 or 9, I think. Then the most recent one that I wrote and illustrated was called "If I Gave the World My Blanket," and that came out
Mm-hmm.
in December of 21. And they are. We just got a note a couple months ago, from the Miami Children's Museum, who want to take that book and create a stage play from it with
Oh,
music.
I love
So
it.
about a half hour long for kids, and they're putting it together now. They sent us a script. We tweaked it quite a bit, and they're going to produce it, I guess, early to mid February. So that's exciting.
I
And
know that's amazing.
uh, they adapted my book. I still can't believe they want to do that. It's a super good book. It's really cute. but this, I hadn't thought that anybody'd want to do this. So it did have an impact. And so that makes me
Yeah,
really happy.
absolutely.
I'm going on
Absolutely.
a I'm going on a Comic-Con cruise for Charles Schulz's Peanuts in the first week of February, second week of February, and from Tampa to Cozumel and back to Tampa. Um, Comic-Con the cruise. They're going to do a floating Comic-Con now. So I'm going to go.
Was
I'll
it?
do a
It
panel or
wasn't
two.
enough. It was not enough to invade San Diego. Now we're going on a cruise.
I know, God.
Hey, that's
Like
cool.
now we don't have to have them on land. Um, so that should be interesting. It's the first one they've done. So so I'll be working that, doing panels, and I'm doing art demos and a speech about Schultz, and keeping busy there, doing a trivia night for Peanuts
Mm.
trivia. That should be really interesting. And there's a new version of the board game Clue coming out that's Peanuts themed, and I drew the board for that and the
Oh,
box, and that should be out. They said maybe in May. I don't know. Looking
that is
forward to that.
cool.
So yeah, I
Talking
keep really
about
busy with my
putting
9 to 5.
talking
Huh?
about putting two things that I love as a kid, the
Yeah.
Peanuts and Clue. That was a lot of fun, So I can
Right.
already imagine
I,
what is going to be the dynamic there of this character
oh, it's
working the
great.
board.
I will tell you this: nobody gets killed. Hmm? Uh, the crime is that someone stole Linus's blanket, and you have to go to different
Oh,
locations in the neighborhood, like the ball field or the pumpkin patch or Charlie Brown's house, to try to find
oh.
out who did it. It's really
Well,
cute. It's a really interesting idea,
it's a pretty serious crime. I mean, you take the blanket
especially
out
to
of
Linus.
Linus, it's serious business right there. I
Yeah.
love it.
So we're
I
gonna
love it.
we're gonna find out who done it and take care of Linus and get his blanket back.
Nice, nice. I can't wait to see that, and obviously I can't wait to hear what's going on once you get on the boat and you go out there, Comic Con on waves, and
Yeah,
see
I'll
what's
follow
going
up
on
with
with that.
you. I'll follow up with you after the cruise and let you know how it went.
Yeah, I love
You
it.
know,
I love it. So listen, last time we talked about the things you just said and how the cultural aspect I remember of what Charles Schulz brought to the world and all this character Japan. I mean, you mentioned merchandise there, but all over the world. I was just making a joke before we start recording on how I was walking here near Florence on a store and I saw a Snoopy on a T-shirt and my wife wanted to get it. And I'm like, I'm about to talk to Justin, which is a senior for for them. It's like no way. So cultural phenomenon, no questions about it. So I invite people to listen to that. But now you're also doing your own strip, and
yes,
I want to hear a lot about that. I know there is something to
great.
do with mythology. I know
Hmm.
that you got to create your own character because I think it's very different when you have the responsibility of somebody else's creation, like in
Yeah,
the term of, I mean, that you bring your own, but you also need to be strict into the vision that Charles had in the past,
yeah.
and compare with, hey, I want to do my own character. How do you even start doing your own characters? And I want to
Well,
know everything about it.
the company that syndicates my comic strip online is Andrews McMeel, and the website is called Go Comics. And they syndicate pretty much 80% of all the comics you see out there. Even Peanuts, Garfield, everything's on there. And they have a training site, or used to, and where people can create a strip. They just upload strips every day or however often they want to, and they get critiqued by fellow people doing it,
Hmm.
fellow creators. And so you get a lot of feedback. And I just got the idea. This was my first year working at Schultz. I said, I want to do my own strip and create my own characters. And something I'd always wanted to do. But somehow, in that atmosphere of working in Charles Schultz's studio, the actual studio where he drew the strip, I don't know, there's a spirits in there or whatever that let you know it's okay, do it, try it, and
Mm.
and urge you forward. So I did, and I came up with this character, and the first strips were terrible, but I was just learning, And so I did that for about 2.5 years and met a lot of really great cartoonists and some good friends out of that. Then they brought me up. It was almost like playing in the minor leagues, and the
That,
company brings you up to their main website. And now I'm in the majors, and that was in 2007, so or six. So since then, I've had Mythtickle. That's the name of my comic strip. I've had it
mhm.
going since then on there, and it's still going. Um, and I just compiled a book of my best strips over the last 15 years of that web comic. So now people can have it in their hands instead of just looking at it on the computer.
Mm.
And it just got printed up, and I've been selling them through my website, and it's doing really well. I'm surprised. I'm really happy. Get yours
Congratulations.
today. So the website
Well,
is
that's cool.
mythtickle.com. And you go there and you can find out all about the books and then I had an old one there that I'm selling for very cheap that I put
Mm.
together when the strip was young. So you can get them both at a pretty good little discount there.
Very cool. Very cool. So let me go with that. You mentioned digital versus print, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's a conversation I will have easily on my other podcast where I talk about technology and society. My
Mm,
background is sociology of communications. I always think about radio the way it used to be, analog versus digital, and how
yeah.
kind of the world has changed. We don't compare with when I was a kid and you didn't have the
Yeah.
digital. So I want to pick your brain on this thing. We talked last time about AI. I don't want to go there, but how to use the tools of Photoshop or other illustration. Using your
Hmm.
pen and your tablet versus doing thing by hands. But I want to touch on the consumption of it, right? So I don't know. Like, do you feel like different reaction once you know that people flip the pages on a book on paper versus scrolling? Like, I gotta tell you, I can't read comics on my phone. I can do a lot of things on my phone, but if
Hmm.
I'm gonna read, I don't know, Mickey Mouse or something like that, or the Peanuts, I want to flip the pages. What's your
Yeah.
thought on that?
Well, I think that speaks to the artist's composition,
Mm-hmm.
whether they have a four frame across or stacked four frames with two on top, two on the bottom. You're looking at that whole piece initially before you dig in to read frame by frame
Mm.
the shapes, the dark areas, the light areas, um, how the colors flow if it's in color. And that is a subconscious thing, I think. I think it just hits you a certain way, like, oh, this is attractive, or, and maybe you don't know why, but what you're doing is you're finding the artist's sense of balance and composition that's pleasing
Mm.
to you.
Yeah.
You don't get that on the phone when you're just kind of going frame by frame and it's small and you have to bring it up big. I hope that my readers look at it on the computer and then they can see all that. I hadn't really considered this until you brought it up,
Mm.
but that's a great point. And I think that's why I think that we take in the composition and it does something to us. We don't really know we're doing it, and then
Mm.
we focus in on one frame and then the next, and then to get the joke.
Mm.
But that is lost, I think, on a phone because it's too
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. You know what? I just thought when you said it, that is so true. Like you kind of get, I don't know, I'm thinking like you go to a museum, you see a big
Yeah.
mural or a big painting, I don't know, the Botticelli, the Birth of Venus, for say, you can't go straight into the details. First, you get hit by the whole thing, right? And,
Right.
and, and when you
And that
said,
was
yeah,
the artist's attention.
exactly. And then you dig
Yeah.
in and you do the same thing when you open a page of a comic, whatever it is, and you kind of get the
Right.
big picture. You still want to read it left to right, bottom, and and follow the story that you want to share. But there is a
Mhm.
meaning in, yeah, I mean, there is a meaning in the whole piece together. Uh, that's that's
Yeah,
interesting.
that hits us um, beyond words. It just does something
Mm-hmm.
to us inside, like any good piece of art, sculpture, any of that. Um, we're attracted to its overall shape and tone,
Mm,
and
yeah,
then we get into the details and want to explore further. You know.
yeah. Now, can you teach those kind of things? Then we go back on your comic, but I know you do teach to kids. Like we mentioned, you
Mhm.
went to Africa, but you also do that to kids. You're teaching them. Can you teach how to, I don't know, approach these almost things that you do without thinking about it?
I think that that would be something that you would teach maybe college students or high school students. I teach mostly
Mm,
middle school.
okay.
And the curriculum that I have right now is a 15 class, one semester uh, course, one class per week. That's what I worked out with the kids in Sharati, Tanzania. But I can pare that all down and find the most resonant lessons into five, which is what I just did in Brooklyn a few weeks ago. I
Mm-hmm.
went there for the Mentor Project and in association with New York Edge, taught at an inner city school in Brooklyn for a week. And it went really well. It was terrific. And so I taught the basic techniques there of emotions, how to track emotions in someone else, and let that impact you. Have some empathy, and put that onto a construction of a face on paper. And I teach them how to do turn that to a quarter turn and then a half turn. But
Mm,
every time they create something, a lesson that I say, it has to have some kind of an emotional content. I
mm,
really stress how emotion carries their work onto a different level that they're not used to creating and the people are not used to seeing in their work. And I promise them, once you really get these emotions big in each frame and they change, people are going to think you're a great cartoonist and not really know why. It's
mm,
just going to hit them because they're not used to seeing it.
mm,
So I start out the class teaching them empathy and attunement with each other and in themselves, and how to put that on the chalkboard or on their paper. And then we move on to other lessons in cartooning, but always kind of coming back to that, getting them to find the emotional life. How do we convey emotions or on an object that doesn't have a face? And we get into that. Um, and then I ultimately teach them how to construct a story in four frames, a journey with cause and effect and all that. They seem very interested. I've taught this here in Santa Rosa. I've taught it in Brooklyn. I've taught it in Africa. Everywhere I teach, the culture is vastly different, but always interesting. And I
mm.
always have to kind of modify on the fly. It's my improv work from when I was an actor comes in handy here.
Right now,
If
yeah.
I ask them a question and no one's responding like I'm used to, okay, yes. And I have little techniques that
Uh-huh.
I've used in my acting in the past that kind
Mm-hmm.
of bring them out and
Yeah,
activate them.
I love that.
So my past career has really helped me in this.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. You don't want to be on stage and you say something and there is no follow up, and you're like, shit. Now where do I go now, right?
No,
But yeah,
right.
there are ways. But what I love about what you said is to start with the empathy, and I don't think when
Mm.
you think about doing a comic strip, or I don't know, like I don't think many people think the word empathy. And so I found it quite curious that you actually start with that. But I also
Yeah,
think that it kind of brings the emotion that you need to, if you don't understand other people's emotion, I'm guessing it's going to be very hard for you to let your emotion out. So
exactly.
is that what you're, it's kind of like a two-way
Yes,
things, a way to
yes.
connect.
You know, Emotional awareness, compassion, attunement, these things are not taught in school.
No.
And if they're taught in schools, that's a good age, because the middle school age kids, everything's changing inside of them. They're getting lost a lot of times, and not kind of knowing how to proceed, how to feel. It's an awkward time. This is a perfect time to try to teach them the importance of all of that, and
Yeah.
taking care of each other. So I try to get them to do that, feeling something inside, maybe generating a feeling and feeling in your face. Okay, where are the lines? How did it change
Mm.
from when you're neutral face? And then I have them track that and put that down on paper. And so that's very intensive in the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of the class, so that later on, when we get into other things, they can still harken back to that and remember it. Because I
Mm.
stress how, so really I'm teaching this really great humanity stuff, but subversively. They think they're learning cartooning, but I'm really kind of slipping this in, because if I were to go in and teach compassion and attunement, they'd just tune
Yeah,
out,
right?
or it would feel
Yeah.
awkward, you know? So I kind of
Yeah.
get it in there under the wire with something else, and hopefully it
Yeah.
sticks. I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope so.
No, I
But
think
it's
it
so
does. I
important.
mean, yeah, you're very passionate about what you do. And you can tell. I mean, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're buying my book. Yeah, of course they are, and making the play out of it, and because you're passionate in what you do. Um,
Yeah, I
so
try to put
yeah,
big emotions and feeling into all my work, especially that
yeah,
if I gave the world my blanket. That book is all about Linus, who has the blanket all the time. He's
hmm,
going around the neighborhood and he's seeing his friends who are sad or angry or
yeah,
scared or whatever they're feeling, and he gives them a blanket, and it alleviates their stress or whatever.
hmm,
And he goes along, and then at the end, he doesn't have a blanket anymore. He ran out, and everyone behind him has a blanket, and they're all happy. And he realizes, I don't need a blanket right now. This is my
right,
this is making me feel the same. That's
right,
kind of the journey of the book.
yeah,
But yeah, the emotional life is everything. Now,
yeah,
I will say this as a caveat. I see a lot of great cartoons in the New Yorker, that style of cartooning, where you have a one frame, all of the characters are completely devoid of emotion.
mm,
Rarely you may see a furrowed brow, but usually it's a couple of characters or one character just standing there, and then there's a caption underneath it, and they are hysterical. They don't really have emotion, but that style of cartooning is amazing to me.
hmm,
Like how they can make that happen. Um, because they're not really telling a story. They're hitting you with a gag, you know. And the
right,
gag is the funny thing. If those characters in those comics had some wild emotion going on, I think it would take away from the impact of that one
mm,
sentence below there. So it's a really interesting balance. You can go one way or the other, but anything in between, I think it's kind of missing.
right.
You
But
want to have
okay,
impact.
so tell me if I'm wrong. But this is what I'm thinking when you say this. It's so the strip is the medium, right? The
Mhm.
methodology, the way that you develop that, as it could be, I don't know, photography or creating a movie or writing a
Yeah,
song or whatever it is, or song in terms of instrument or lyrics. But you can tell different kind of stories and have a different technique. So in one case, you're
sure.
talking about somebody delivering a one-liner, right? And
Yeah,
in your case, it's more about no. There is a story. There is a beginning. You get
right.
into the how
Because this
Linus
is one
is
of the things I
feeling,
teach.
and yeah,
Yeah, one of the things I teach as we get on later in the class, frame by frame by frame by frame, there has to be cause and effect. This emotion causes an effect in this character, which causes
right,
a change in this next frame, and that's the journey of that joke or funny little situation. There's a little story there. So you
mm,
have a couple of frames setting it up, and then you hit the joke. Maybe there's an after. math or a denouement, whatever. With a one frame comic, you don't have that. You can't tell really a story with that.
Mm.
So it's just a bam, a gag right there.
Right.
If you were
Yeah.
going to do a one frame comic with a drawing of a wild emotion, I don't think it would be as impactful because you don't have the cause.
Yeah.
You only have the effect, you
Right.
know,
Right.
and it diffuses the impact somehow.
Yeah.
The science of this is very interesting. I don't
Oh.
understand it all completely, but I think the story with the cause and effect is separate domain, and maybe the one people are most used to looking at in the paper. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe,
Yeah.
but
Right.
that's kind of where I dwell.
Yeah. I love it. So let's go back where we were gonna focus for the remaining of the time that we have on the
Yeah.
Mythtickle. So you've been doing that for a while. Like, tell us what it is about. I know it's kind of like
Oh,
gods,
okay.
semi-god, semigod,
Yeah,
and they're kids,
it's
right?
characters. It's they're young people. I think that they're around middle school age, maybe
Okay.
11 to 12. The characters are all mythological characters or characters
Yeah.
from legends and folklore,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and they're all together in this kind of a fantastical space,
Yeah.
interacting with each other. So it's kind of a culture clash, but it's not always a negative clash. But you have
Mm-hmm.
Karma. She's a little Japanese girl, and her best friend is Ziva, who is a goddess from Central Africa. And then there's Thor, the naughty little boy from Asgard. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have a dragon and knight. They are my main characters. And they all go to school together. Every once in a while, I'll do a classroom strip, and their teacher is Ms. Nature. And we never see, we only hear her voice off. And it's in a big white tree, their
Uh-huh.
classroom, which is kind of symbolic of the tree of knowledge. And so I don't know. I mean, if I think of something kind of funny or a gag, I kind of think of the characters in the strip. I'm like, well, who would most likely say this? You know, where's this first line coming from? Who would the impacted one? That would be funny if Karma did that, that kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's high concept, I know, and that's probably why I'm not in newspapers. But because, well, you need something very simple for newspapers, a guy and his
Mm-hmm.
cat, or whatever. You see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting
Mm-hmm.
that stuff down. That stuff's great.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do those, but I couldn't think of enough funny things. I need the stuff that kind of activates me in my heart, and that's
Yeah.
mythology. I love it. I love
Yeah.
folklore and all that. So I just kind of worked on these characters and made them very solid personas, reflective of their region of the world. And I'm just having a
Yeah.
lot of fun with it,
I love it.
you
So
know?
when you said that, I'm thinking you're mixing culture. I mean, you're putting
Yeah,
a, you're putting karma Japanese, and you're putting another god that is Nordic. Then you're putting
yeah,
someone else that it's. I mean, just that. I think you can play so many different
yeah. It's a lot of
innuendos, and I mean, it's almost
in this new
infinite.
it is infinite. And in this new book, I had a storyline that I ran a few years ago. And it went for 66 episodes. So it's 66 pages in the book, and it's a
Mm.
long continuing story. Um, it takes up about a third of the book, actually. And I kill my main character. He dies and winds up going to the afterworld, but he doesn't know which one to go to. And so he winds up in the Egyptian afterworld and has an adventure there. Meanwhile, while he's having this adventure, his best friend, the little knight, goes and search for him in like a typical quest and try to find him. But he doesn't know which afterlife he goes to. So he winds up going into a different afterlife, the one in Asgard, which is Hell,
Uh-huh.
Hel. And then he meets up with another character who's down there from Asgard. So it kind of ping pongs back and forth between these two characters in different underworlds, and it comes together near the end, and they
Mm.
travel back. And exploring that, I did a lot of research into Niflheim, which and in Hell, these worlds in Asgard, and then Duat in Egypt, and the gods in Egypt. A whole bunch of them are in there, and it's really I'm very, very proud of it, actually,
Oh,
the way it turned out. Because mainly when I started writing it, I was just going along and I didn't know how it was going to end. I'd never done that before. And I was going to give myself an experiment. Well, let's see what happens.
Mm.
And so it went on for month after month. I'm like, I should wind this up. What's going to happen? So I didn't know. And it turned out to be the best story that I've done. So I don't know. I was kind of walking a tightrope there for a little while.
Hmm.
But when I was a kid, and I was really into comic strips when I was about 6 years old, seven, five, just learning how to read. I was captivated by Peanuts and Charlie Brown, Snoopy. I had these little paperbacks, and I would read them because I was reading when I was really little, before first grade. There'd be bigger words that I didn't understand, or they'd be talking about things I didn't understand. So I'd have to go to the dictionary, the encyclopedias, and look things up. And I learned a lot from that. So I think what I'm doing, without really trying to preach with my strip, I want people to investigate these mythologies. Maybe what
Yeah.
I'm doing will spark them to go, well, find out more about Duat. I've never heard that name before, other than in swing music, Duat, Duat, Duat. So let's look that up and find out more about it. Anubis, does he really look like
Yeah.
that? And so they look. I'm wanting to get people to research and look
Yeah.
stuff up and
Yeah.
get more into folklore and stuff, because it's brilliant stuff and we can learn a lot from it.
Yeah, I love that you said that. We can learn a lot from it because I love mythology myself. I have always, with my mom, I write some kids story. What is important to me is that there is always a moral. There's always a
Yes.
lesson, right? And when we look at even the scariest story, Hansel and Gretel's, and from the Grimm brothers, with that, back in the day, stories were, well, there wasn't Disney soft. They were pretty,
No.
pretty heavy, but they were
Yeah.
teaching people to not go in the forest by yourself, kid. Right? I mean,
Right.
it's basic lessons. And mythology is pretty much the basic of morals for all the culture that
Moral.
they use it. So
Yeah.
there is a big responsibility, deciding
They're all kind of
to go
morality.
into
They're all
that.
kind of
Yeah,
morality tales.
right.
Teaching people how to behave was kind of how it all started, I think.
Yeah.
And then through oral tradition, I think they wound up with making them more entertaining.
Hmm.
But I love how fallible the gods are in many of these
They're very
mythologies,
human, right?
particularly, yeah, particularly the Nordic ones,
Yeah,
and Greek too. I mean, the higher gods
yeah,
were a mess. They did not
yeah.
behave well, you
It's like
know,
a soap
and I
opera.
think that's really fun for people to listen to.
Yeah.
You know,
They're very human, unlike
yeah.
a more religious type of character. So when you start this, sounds to me that you go, let's see, as you said, let's go what the character brings me. So you're not maybe a plotter, you're more a pantser, like you write, but do you let the character brings you all the time, or do you start with writing? So
Um,
do you start with a
it
visual, do you
depends.
start with a writing? Do you prefer
It
one or the
depends.
other?
Sometimes I'll
Yeah.
hear a joke, an old joke, and I'll go, "Oh, I think I can twist that into my strip." And then
Huh.
I'll take the idea of the joke and I'll kind of twist it around, put some new clothes on it, maybe a different kind of ending than the punchline. Maybe something funnier happens after that, and I can dress that up in a different costume and put it in my strip.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll just start drawing a character, doing something silly, and I'll think, "Oh, I think I can make something out of this." So it happens in both ways.
Okay, I love that.
Um, Charles Schulz once said that creating a comic strip is not that hard. Just start drawing something silly and something will come to you. And I've used that technique a lot and it does work sometimes,
Hmm.
but you got to
So
focus and you got to be creative.
you start drawing the visual, and then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of envision what's gonna be the bubble after that you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. If there is one, I like doing comic strips that
If
don't
there
have
is
words,
one,
but
I
every
love.
once in a
I love it.
while, It's hard to
Hmm.
do comics without words, but every once in a while I can. And those are the ones that I stress to my students that are the
Mm.
funniest and
Right.
the best to try to do, because those comics can be read by anyone in the world. You
Yeah.
don't have, and they'll get it.
Yeah.
They don't need lettering or translation. But yeah, I'll start drawing my dragon character Booty. Let's just say I start drawing him, and he's standing there, and I thought, well, let's draw him on a skateboard. Let's see what happens there. And I'll draw him on a skateboard, and then I'll start thinking, well, why is he on a skateboard? Where's he going?
Hmm.
Um, that starts the ball rolling. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that process goes. Sometimes I don't always create like that, but I've have a few strips that started that way,
Yeah. I
and an
like how
idea.
you can. Yeah. Then you experiment. Sometimes is it something you hear. Sometimes it's just like something
Yeah,
that inspire you out of the blue, and I love that. But then what matters in the end is what people get out of it. Have you ever
yeah.
found yourself where your objective was something, your message, let's say, was something, and then somebody's like, I didn't see it that way. I still love it, but maybe
Uh,
the audience sometimes twist it in a way that is still awesome, but
yeah.
it's not
Well,
exactly what you wanted to.
yeah. Usually, what that means is that I thought something was really funny, and it didn't get that kind of a response from people. And I'll have to look at it and go, well, wait a minute, what is it? Why aren't they laughing? Or why
Hmm.
aren't they, why doesn't this particular strip getting as much feedback as the one last
Uh
week
huh.
that I didn't think was as funny?
Right.
So I got to try to figure it out. I'm like, well, maybe it's the wording. Usually it's the wording, because there's
Hmm.
rhythm that you got to, bounce. And any comedian will tell you that you got to trim.
Mm-hmm.
And so you try to think, read it. Is there a word to stumble over? Are they stumbling over this? You try to dissect it and figure it out.
Hmm.
You don't always figure it out, but then he goes, well, maybe the
Right.
drawings just need to be simpler here. So you don't know,
Yeah.
but that's the part of the learning process, you know.
Yeah.
But I've never really had exactly what you described, where someone just interpreted that thing completely
Mm.
differently. I
Yeah.
might have over all these years. I just don't remember.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
stick out.
Yeah. But the reason why I ask you this is because sometimes, especially when a culture plays, I always find the translation of, let's say, a book or a story, you have to adapt it to the culture, right? You can't just literally translate something. I give you an example,
Yeah.
right? I can read in English and I can read in Italian, in Spanish a little bit, but and I'm a big fan of Harry Potter, right? J.K.
Okay.
Rowling's.
Uh huh.
So I read it in English, and then in Italian, you'd normally translate a lot of things. Even the movie titles, they're different. The Hollywood movies, even the title itself is different. You have
Mm.
actors. There's not the subscript. They are actually reacting professionally, and so sometimes even the joke is completely different. The name of, I don't know, Ravenclaw or one of the houses of Harry Potter is completely different name. And I'm like,
Mm.
but it still work, right? Because you need to adopt it. But then you tell me what you just said, and it's like, I'd rather write it without the words because I can just communicate it in every language I want. People just see a facial
Yeah.
expression. And I think where I'm going with this is I think if you can, it's kind of like music. You don't translate music, but it hits you, right? And
Yeah.
if you can do a character that doesn't need to be translated, but it deliver your message, that's
Hmm.
that's pretty
And that
magic.
is, it's some kind of an attunement, whether it's music,
Mm.
hitting that tuning fork in your heart, or visually art can do that, or a comic strip can do that with no
Yeah.
words. There you get into the specifics of showing a particular expression on a character's face. You know, you won't, if it's accurate and what leads up to it makes sense, you don't need words. Every human being is going to be able to relate to that.
Yeah.
Those are the most powerful things, and most powerful comics for me. I
Yeah.
love those that don't have words and that have some kind of an emotional resonance. I have a couple of those in my book that I'm very proud of, the way they
Yeah.
worked out, and they're a little more sensitive. Not every comic that I have in the book is funny. A
Mm-hmm.
few of them are a little serious, very heartfelt or sentimental, like
Mm-hmm.
that, and impactful. I've had people, comment on those very favorably, and that it impacted them, and so that makes me want to do more.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are my favorites.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be funny. But it
No,
needs to communicate, move. It
oh,
needs to move
right.
people, right? That's the key. That's when you have a good story to share.
Yeah, you want to make them laugh
Uh,
most of the time because that'll keep them coming back. But every
you
once in a
know,
while, you slip in a sentimental one that might get them to go, "Oh, I
yep.
like
You
that."
know, hey, you feel about Charlie Brown. It's not. Sometimes it's quite serious. Some serious
Absolutely.
some serious topic right there.
Yeah.
That's another lesson. Well, listen, Justin, I know you have things to do, and we are at 40 minutes. Of course, I could talk to
Okay.
you forever. Um, I wanna give you one couple of minutes just so that you can share how people can read find out about the
Oh yeah.
comic, get in touch with you if you want to, your website, and then I'm gonna leave people with follow the show, of course, subscribe and stay tuned because you will be back. There's no questions
Yeah.
about
Well,
that. All right,
I
so
will.
that's
I could
good.
talk about lots of things. I love
Cool.
talking to you.
So I'll
But
let you close
by
here.
now, maybe if people were have listened to me this far, they're probably going, "What is the name of that comic strip again? That was myth what?"
Yeah,
So let me make it clear.
get it
It's two
clear.
words together: myth, like mythology, and tickle, like something's going to make you laugh. All right, and you put it
Hmm.
together, myth tickle, and then also that's kind of like saying mystical with a lisp. So
Hmm.
it's Mythtickle. Now, if you want to find it online, it's at gocomics.com/mythtickle, or go to gocomics.com and put it in a search. Um, to find my website where you can look at samples of my book and find out about the book and samples of my work, it's mythtickle.com. Made that super easy. And if you want to email me, it's justin@mythtickle.com. So that ought to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that definitely will do it. And if they didn't write down all of these, I'm gonna put it in the notes for the podcast. And if they're watching the
Okay.
video, it will be on YouTube, so they don't even need to write it. They just need to click on it, and they'll
Right.
come there. So Justin, I just love
Yeah. Let me
chatting with
just say,
you.
it's been great. And I'm very proud of this book that came out that I just published. It's full color. Um, there's strips in there that I have not yet put on the website. Uh, so, and stuff about the author, um, character breakdowns, each character, kind of like a cast list of, who they are and everything. I'm really happy with how it came out. It's something to be proud of, and I hope a lot of people buy it. That'd be great.
I hope I hope so too. I hope so too, Justin. Thank you very much. I definitely encourage people to do that, just that, and fall in love with your character. I know you put a lot of yourself into it,
Yeah.
and I know you're an amazing creative person, and I know people will love what they're gonna see. So, thank you everybody
Thank
for
you.
listening. Thank you, Justin, for being here, and stay tuned. There'll be more stories and storytellers on Audio Signal Podcast. Bye,
All right.
everybody. All
Bye.
right.
Thank you.